Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy. How are you, love?
Kia ora, Pat. I just saw a comment on Reddit that made my brain split in half.
We're tangenting. Hang on. Are we doing a tangent one sentence into the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Like literally, I was just like, "Oh, yeah, cool." Go to close Reddit, and I just see in the New Zealand subreddit, "Why is this country so soft on violent crime? I'm all good with non-violent offenders being given lenient sentences, but it definitely concerns me with how this country's justice system is just letting violent people back into society. Everyone deserves a second chance, but if you kill someone, ram raid, attack someone, you need to be in jail for a while for the sake of everyone else's safety. Here's the kicker. Sincerely, an American living in New Zealand."
You're right. Thank you. We won't take advice from an American on the justice system, will we?
I was just like, look at the great successes of your own justice system.
Hey, good to be with you all tonight. Thanks for coming on board and having a chat with us. Geoffrey Miller's going to join us any second now to have a chat about some big things, actually. The immunity decision that fell down today. It's a strange one. We'll talk about it with Geoffrey, but they've said, I guess I'm paraphrasing, while the president is in office, he or she has immunity while acting in their official capacity. So now the debate is, what's an official capacity? Was talking about 12,500 votes to Georgia. Was that an official capacity or was it not? And so it'll go on and on. We'll touch with Geoffrey as well about the Trump-Biden debate. Of course, we talked about that last night, and I know it did happen last Friday, but we're a bit slow here in New Zealand, aren't we? But Geoffrey's got some thoughts around that. And also elections around the world, France and the US, and what impact they're going to have in general, but also specifically what impact they're going to have in the South Pacific or in the Pacific. Let's say huge thanks to all of our patrons. Love having you guys on board. Thanks so much for being a part of what we do. We do, live off, wrong word, survive by your donations that you give through via your patronage. And we want to thank you for being a part of that. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. A whole bunch of early interviews in there as well. And a little bit of news and updates we give you as we're going through the time as well. If you like what we do, if you want to support what we do, a good way to do it is patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There's other ways to do it. Come and join us live, share our stuff around, tell people how beautiful we are. Onwards and onwards and onwards. Chewy, I've got something to show you before we start. Okay. I don't know whether this is setting a good or a bad precedent for the show we're going to have, or if you've seen this floating around the internet at the moment. This was broadcast live on TV. You want to have a look, people watching. If you're not watching, if you're listening to us in the podcast, we're 3.5 minutes in. Top right-hand corner, if people haven't seen this, the guy up here with the white face, he's got a bit of a balding spot. Have a look what he did on live television whilst watching a football game. Top corner, this guy here, watching him. And he's got a bit of a spoon there.
I don't know what happened to
the
set play coach, whether he's still there or not.
I think you might have missed the start of it there.
I did. I missed the start of it.
This is after he does.
There we go. I'm sorry. Professional. Here he is, middle of the screen, and sniffity sniff, sniff, sniff.
Oh, a little bit of soccer powder.
And a little bit to his friend, and sniffity sniff, sniff, sniff.
The sport is boring unless you're hanging.
So, very recognisable chap there. Wonder what his bosses will be saying on Monday morning, but it's quite hilarious that the person who's put this up, I'll just mute it this time here. Oh, see, look, they're pointing him, they're pointing, and I'm guessing, Joey, that he's got like a cold and he's congested. That's what I would.
Pseudoephedrine.
Yeah, that's what I would
cold drill. He's just being responsible. He's being responsible. Maybe he found it.
Yeah.
And was like afraid that a little kid would get his hands on it, so he was getting rid of it, but all he had to get rid of it was a tiny spoon.
Yeah, and a nose, or maybe he was testing it to see what it was, just to make sure what to do with it. Pretty hilarious. I would love to be a fly on the wall when whoever that gentleman was walked into his boss's office on Monday morning, and just see what that conversation would be. And there's like a pee kit they're waiting for him to be tested in.
I would imagine that the cocaine is a pretty good decongestant.
Yeah, I imagine so as well. All right. Sorry, just a random start to the show. We're going to talk to Geoffrey Miller. And in fact, let's rip into welcome to the show, Geoffrey Miller. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Pat. Hi there, Chewy. Good to be back with
Oh,
you.
yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, you too, man.
I was just
Geopolitical
thinking, you're
analyst.
kind of like New Zealand's last surviving late night news program in a way. Now that TV1 and TV3 don't have late bulletins, like you're it. So you've got a big responsibility there.
Yeah, and we're getting all of their leftover funding, which is this much. It's a big donut left over. We are going to talk about this later on, though, Geoffrey. There was some noises made today by this government kind of starting to say, hey, you know that thing that you guys in Labor talked about when it came to Facebook and Google, and we said that was Big Brother and we're not going to do it. Yeah, we think that's a good idea now, so we're going to do exactly what we said you guys shouldn't do. Labor, will you come on board? Because ACT doesn't want a bar of it. So, yes, we will talk about that a bit later in the show, in fact. Look, Geoffrey, thanks so much for joining us. There was a very interesting article written by, or spoken to, PMN. Remind me what the acronym's for? PMN?
Pacific Media Network. So I'm not sure exactly who owns it and how it comes about, but they have a live breakfast program that they relaunched, I believe, in May with a lot of live interviews. So I went on there on Monday morning to talk about the debate and the US elections and the French elections and their impact. So it was a really interesting chat there for about 20 minutes with the host. So it was a really interesting chat. And then they put this article together, which is always useful for those of us who don't want to sit through and listen to a 20-minute interview. Yeah.
If we were more professional, we'd do that kind of thing as well, Geoffrey, but we're not. So we just make people sit through our bullshit, don't we, Chewy? That's about it. Now, let's talk about this, because one of the things you talked about in that article, and we want to get to as well, is this idea about what's happening in France at the minute. And I guess you could also say in the UK at the end of this week. The UK seems almost guaranteed to go left because of 14 years of austerity, whatever it is now, super austerity. So almost sure to go left. But it seems that in France they're going pretty hard right. Certainly the first round of voting would suggest that's in the lead at the moment. In America, after that debate, there are many saying it's sort of, well, there are many, I don't want to exaggerate. There are some saying that Biden doesn't have a chance. If that was the case, that would go kind of pretty hard right. And we'd like to know in general what you think that means, what that tells us, but also what does it mean for us? Like in New Zealand, we're always, when people land on the plane, we always go, oh, what do you think of New Zealand? It's the first thing we ever ask anyone. It's a bit like that in politics. How's it going to impact us, Geoffrey? That's what we really want to know. Sir.
Look, I think the centre is collapsing all around us. And in New Zealand, we had our election last year, and you saw that happen. You saw the smaller parties do pretty well. You saw a lukewarm vote really for national. It wasn't the big sweeping victories of old. And when you look at France, you see the National Rally doubling its vote, 34% in those first round of elections on Sunday. It was 18% 2 years ago. Even the UK, like you're talking about Labour going to do really well, and they probably will have a landslide, right, towards Labour, but it's being supercharged by vote splitting because they have first past the post, and you have Nigel Farage's Reform UK party there on the right. That's splitting the right vote. Yeah. So it's not showing up. They probably won't win many, if any, seats, Reform. Maybe they get a couple if they're lucky, but Labour will do very well out of it, but it's more, it's more coincidental in a sense. I don't think there's
a byproduct,
huge enthusiasm for Labour, right? In the United Kingdom, there's some enthusiasm because there has been 14 years of Tory rule. And if you're only, in a two-party system, your only option is the other party. So voters kind of have to get enthused about Labour because what's the serious alternative? Even if they are not of, that persuasion, they might vote Labour just to get rid of Tory. So then you look at the United States, and of course, it's Trump once again, 8 years on from 2016. And it really should be an easy win for Joe Biden this year. If you look at the stock market, it's at record highs and economic growth, but yet it's inflation and the cost of living, and people do not feel wealthier in the slightest. We've seen these cost of living pressures here in New Zealand, and how everyone's very grumpy at the moment, to put it quite simply. Everyone feels very battered. We got through the pandemic, but things didn't get any better really after the pandemic. Things got harder, if anything, with rampant inflation. And it's been like that all around the world. And, one of the responses that a lot of voters have had is to just vote out of frustration for the fringes, because they want they want their leaders to take notice and to make life better for them, and that's just not happening. So the centre is failing. Macron is failing in France, Emmanuel Macron, in Britain, in the United States, in New Zealand, and I think that's the real common thread here. Populism is back with a vengeance. It was a big topic, going back to 2015, 2016 with Brexit and with the Trump victory, but it's never gone away, and it's only got worse in a sense or it's become stronger because of the pandemic, because of inflation, these cost of living pressures. And I think in the end, you've got to address the root causes here. And there's no use sort of saying, Trump's evil, or, you shouldn't be voting for the far right in France. I mean, the other parties, they're looking to gang up on the far right and say, we won't work with you. And okay, yes, in the short term, maybe that's some kind of answer. But I think in the longer term, you need to provide those voters with a positive solution, and you want them to vote for you, and not just against, against the populists. So, there are lots of questions in my mind about all of these things, but I think they are all connected in the end.
The interesting thing about going to the fringes as well is it seems that some that go to the fringes because they're like just sick of everybody else, or they are voting against the other, often come back with a fair bit of regret. I mean, Brexit is the perfect example. I laughed because I was writing Brexit as you said Brexit, because the newspapers the day after were saying, regret and remorse. And everyone was like, we didn't think this would pass. This was just a vote to go, stuff the establishment sort of thing. And I think you're even seeing that in New Zealand a little bit as well, that, there's that old adage that people voted for National and the right because they wanted their house prices to go up by 10%. But what they're getting is a whole new line of legislation that they weren't voting for. And you can probably see that in the unfavourability in the ratings when it comes to Luxon as an individual. Historically low, like personality polls, whatever the correct poll is, performance polls, compared to a first-time Prime Minister 6 months in. And I wonder if that's a lesson for us, that when we get really pissy and we go, fuck you all, I'm going to vote for these little guys, it won't do anything, but we'll just do that. All of a sudden they get in and we're like, what have we done? And I mean, I guess America, it's not just a little fringe guy, but it's Trump. And after that debate on Friday, to be really honest, there is some good arguments coming out about Biden, but we understand how optics works, and we understand that it's it would appear today, might be different in 3 months, today to be a pretty tough road for Biden to win that one. Although in saying that, my fourth point before I shut up, is that it normally comes down to like 100,000 votes in 7 counties deciding who's president. So, I guess I was just coming back to that point that when we vote for the fringes, often people who do that as a protest end up regretting it.
Yes, I think that's very true. I think that's been the case, and I don't think we should be under any illusion that Trump's going to do anything for working people either. And I think a lot of the voters know that. They know that Trump is only out for himself, I think, as Barack Obama said. But that's not going to stop them voting for him anyway. They're so frustrated at the cost of living never being higher, about the lack of opportunities in the workplace. I mean, I think one of the big trends we're going to see now going forward is AI destroying a lot of white collar jobs. You think of stock photographers, for example. There was a Reddit posting, you mentioned Reddit earlier, I noticed yesterday on the New Zealand subreddit, with a magazine, tradie magazine, and it had the group of workers there in high-vis vests, and there was a big discussion about this was AI generated, and you could go down the rabbit hole reading all the answers, that sort of show that it's an AI picture. But you just think, look at that, that's incredible. 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, it would be unthinkable. You would have a stock photograph that someone would have been paid for a photographer. That was a good job, right? And it's now gone. Why would you pay for stock photos now when you can generate it using AI? And if you think back to 2016 with the whole when Trump was here for the first time around, often what was talked about was the car factories and the middle class jobs being destroyed in the Midwest that were gone. That you had these good paying middle class jobs in factories in the 60s, 70s, that were no longer there, and that's why they turned to vote Trump. Well, I think from now on, you're going to see increasingly it's the white collar jobs that get destroyed, and increasingly through AI. So, populism is not going away. And until you get some of these big solutions, universal basic income, for example, taxing, finding a way to tax these big tech companies where, as a society, we've never been richer, but the wealth is so concentrated. In the end, that goes back to, the whole theory of the 1%, and, some of the things that Occupy were raising during the financial crisis. Well, it's only got, a lot more concentrated. You've got all those statistics about wealth being concentrated in, a small number of individuals and companies. That wealth concentration is far greater now than it was during the global financial crisis. So in the end, the centrists, they're going to have to find some solutions to this. And you're going to talk later about the media stories, I know. And, this is tinkering around the edges, in my view. I think you need to do full-scale regulation of big tech, really, if you're going to make any difference, because there is a huge amount of money that's being made by these companies that in the past would have been distributed around society. Now it's concentrated in just a few big tech companies. And we need to find an answer for this, because it is fueling a lot of resentment in the end, and it is fueling populism. So, it goes back to, some of these things that Bernie Sanders was talking about way back when, and his answer was free college. And I think there are arguments in favor of that, because if these, the only answer is to upskill, we're going to have to address some of these things. Yeah.
One other thing just to add to that, because you've said AI, I think it's not just AI though, it's also AI and automation. And then And then when you join AI to the automation, like I'm looking at some video coming through recently of what's happening in Amazon warehouses at the moment, being people-less. And that's because of the automation as well. That's sort of a part of it. But
absolutely. I mean, it's been a development, right? You've gone from automation to now AI, and it's incredible. I just think we're just not aware of the rate of change here. And while it's interesting to talk about, Joe Biden stuffing up on the debate, and I think it's important, right? His personal qualities are a big factor as well.
Yeah.
But I think, it should, if Joe Biden really were promising the kinds of changes that would make life better for ordinary people, it would be a much easier sell, wouldn't it? He would have something really very saleable that would get voters excited. Voters are not excited about Joe Biden. They're not really excited about Donald Trump. They're simply voting for Trump out of frustration, and you'll probably have a low voter turnout in the elections in November. That would be my guess.
Shall we jump in, friend?
Lots of interesting stuff there. I think the protest vote we've always had here in New Zealand, a lot of people would vote for Winston Peters because he calls it as it is, and he says what we're all thinking and that sort of thing. And I don't think anyone really expects him to do well, but then he ends up holding the balance of power every time. I think what Pat said about Brexit was really true. No one expected that to pass, but there were that many people dissatisfied with the party pushing it, or pushing against it, I should say, that they voted against it, or they voted for it. And
careful what you ask for, you might get it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've spent most of today talking about the dangers of AI with my workmates, and just because I saw that tradie magazine. One of my workmates showed a presentation that a friend of his had made using AI, and I was like, "Well, I can tell it's AI, but a lot of people wouldn't spot this as being a non-human presenter." And the more that someone's voice is available, the closer the voice match gets. So you can mock up a Biden deepfake, you can mock up a Trump deepfake, you can get them to say whatever they want, and it'll do the rounds, and it'll do damage before anybody gets you go, that's fake, and people go, I don't care, it's what I believe in anyway.
Yeah.
And through all of this, I'm reminded of the Black Mirror. They had an episode called the Waldo Moment, where an animated blue bear runs for British Parliament and does really well because people are pissed off with the establishment. And I think that's a case of the establishment politician. You know, you get people go, politicians are all the same, left or right, it doesn't matter. They're not engaged. They don't think that any of these guys are going to do anything for them. So I'm going to vote for whatever fringe thing I think might happen. And it might be that I hate immigrants. It might be that I hate trans people. It might be this, that, or the other thing, but it becomes a one issue voting. And that's why we see this rise in populism, where you have, you know, the French, huge anti-immigration push. Same in Germany, same in Italy, because of that wave of immigration they've had from the conflict in Syria. And people don't feel listened to, and they lash out. And I think it's often, it's not the consequence that they were after. They're going to get a whole lot more. And I think we've seen the same in the States. It's human nature. The whole world has gone through a really tough thing. Lots of people have died. Lots of people's jobs have gone. I want something to happen, rattle the cage.
Yeah. I was just going to say, when you look at the National Rally in France, they have evolved to a degree, and they've been quite savvy in the last couple of years in focusing on cost of living, focusing on inflation, focusing on rolling back VAT on basic, goods, on energy, for example. They've been quite clever in downplaying some of their more racist elements that they had in the past. Some of that is still there. In the end, the party still has a heritage, and Marine Le Pen is, still the daughter of the founder, who, was much more open with his views, and was also more of a fringe movement as a result. But the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, its success has very much been driven by the high inflation that we've seen over the last 2-3 years since the pandemic. And it's ridden the wave of inflation to its success here. So I think there's a lesson there for the mainstream, for Emmanuel Macron. The voters don't want these pension reforms, these right-wing pension reforms. They don't want, to have to face these constant inflation. They feel like going backwards. They feel like their wages are being eroded by inflation. And so the lesson has to be find some solutions to these big problems that ordinary working people are facing. I think in the end, that's what you've got to do. You've got to look at the root causes of the discontent, find better solutions, offer them to the voters, and implement them. If you do all of that, you'll be winning huge majorities of the vote. And I don't see that, though, at the moment. What I see is the centre, the mainstream, the establishment, just trying to find tactical ways to disqualify the far right. So that's what they're doing in France. They're trying to blockade it. In Germany, there's always talk about banning the AfD party, the Alternative for Germany party. I think these are silly solutions. You can't ban the ideas in the end, and they will just keep cropping up in new parties when you try these kind of tactics, or it will just fuel support for them in all likelihood. You'll make them into martyrs.
Let's move on to the news that broke today. This is a couple of minutes. We'll watch this together and then talk about the decision that SCOTUS made today to do with immunity and the President of the United States of America.
The events of the January 6th insurrection,
USA! USA!
the former US president's role in it, and whether he illegally conspired to overturn his election defeat.
We fight like hell.
Was expected to soon be dealt with in a courtroom. But in a historic ruling, the US Supreme Court has granted former presidents immunity from prosecution, but not in all cases, something Donald Trump has called for himself.
Presidential immunity is imperative, or you practically won't have a country anymore.
In the decision, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that the president must have some immunity to be able to execute the duties of his office fearlessly and fairly. Without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents could quickly become routine. The Supreme Court rejected Trump's claims that he should be completely immune for his actions around January 6th, but decided that any official acts as president should be protected from prosecution. The Supreme Court was divided. Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor calling the decision deeply wrong with disastrous consequences, writing, "The president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent."
Today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do.
Justice Sotomayor also gave hypotheticals, saying orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organises a military coup to hold on to power, immune.
The American people must decide. They want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it.
The government lawyer taking Trump to court over January 6th now has to decide what are unofficial acts that can still be prosecuted.
That means the chances of a trial before the election are zero at this point.
But Trump will be back in a New York courtroom next week regardless, when he's due to be sentenced for his hush money case. Alice Wilkins.
So there you go, guys. Now, just to spell it out, I mean, we don't need to spell it out, but basically what they're saying is the president needs to be able to commit crimes if he was in his official capacity and not be held accountable for them legally. That's because what do you need immunity from? You need immunity from illegal actions. That's where we're at. Of course, the debate is now going to shift into what is and what isn't an official act. But Geoffrey, this is just today's news. Love to get your take on it.
Yeah, it is really interesting, isn't it? And it's going to be fought out through the courts. I guess the immediate implication is that it's not going to be resolved in time for the election. So these court cases will drag on. And if Trump can win the election, in all likelihood, he's won in a sense. So that's, I guess, one big implication straight away. It's going to delay and drag everything out further. Beyond that, I mean, a couple of points. Polarization is visible here. This is what I've been really talking about throughout this chat, this polarization we're seeing in politics all around the world, and the rise of populists and the extremes. And you're seeing in the Supreme Court, I don't think this is healthy, where you've got this polarization, the 3 liberal judges all dissent, the 6 conservative judges pass it. So, in a sense, it almost becomes like a replica of a parliament almost. And I don't think that's healthy. In the end, you want a Supreme Court and you want judges who are independently minded, and that's not what you've got now in the US. Yeah. But I think, look, I think it's a really interesting question. I can see both sides if I'm honest with all of this. I mean, you think of presidents up till this point have had a sense of sort of de facto immunity, because if you look at George Bush with the Iraq War or Barack Obama with drone strikes, they've not been prosecuted. And so Trump is the first one where you really got a prosecution. Up till now, it kind of almost has been a de facto immunity from prosecution. Not in all cases. I mean, you can go back to Nixon and impeachment and that kind of thing. But, there has been some level of protection, I guess, for presidents. So it's now, now it's going to be resolved through the courts. I mean, of course, those examples that Sonia Sotomayor raised are outrageous, aren't they? What a president could do with immunity. But it is, it's going to be debated through the courts, and no doubt there's going to be all kinds of hearings and appeals. And this definition of official versus non-official acts is going to be pretty crucial.
It's a sad way to look at it, but it's almost like the Americans want to hold their presidents accountable for crimes they commit against Americans, whether it's Nixon or whether it's Trump. And for those kind of foreign people, when we commit crimes against them, it's fine. Don't have to hold our president accountable for those, do we? Chewy, what do you say about it, mate? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, there is an example that springs to mind. Obama ordered a drone strike on a US citizen.
That's true.
So
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's an extrajudicial killing on a US citizen, admittedly overseas.
But I mean, you
that
can
would be something.
I mean, you can see, look, you know, with the prosecution of Trump happening, that this, you can see this being repeated in the future against other presidents, and then you know, where does that lead to? Do presidents then essentially, you know, do nothing when they're in office because they're afraid of being prosecuted? I guess that's the Trump argument. You know, the other side is exactly as Biden said, no one should be above the law. I mean, I would agree with that as well. I mean, I don't think you want your presidents to have immunity for, or just doing anything, because it would lead to, you know, in itself outrageous consequences. And you know, in Donald Trump's case, of course, this is all about January the 6th, and you shouldn't have immunity for whatever you do in those situations. You should be accountable for your actions. So I think it's a hard one, and it's going to end up in the courts. Really, it's a political question, I guess, where you stand with a lot of these things, but it will end up being resolved in one way or the other, probably through the courts, but maybe politically as well, because if Donald Trump wins in November, maybe these legal processes end up getting, you know, essentially stayed. So
they go away.
We will have to see. But you know, there's a political element, of course, to this. It can't probably remain just a you know, legal judicial matter.
I mean, I can see what they're trying to avoid. It's kind of like, I guess, the failed state model of, like, as soon as you get voted out, the incoming leader throws you in jail, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is some real sort of South America junta type behavior that I don't think anybody really expects of America, but still. And I think Trump is weaponizing this because he knows he's as shady as fuck, and it's all of his business dealings and backhandedness and leaking of classified material and that sort of thing, which I think through any metric should be actionable under the Justice Department. It's if he's going to have the catch-all of, like, oh, it's an official act because I was officially the president, so therefore everything's an official act, is just bananas.
Yeah,
it is. It's going to be a strange one.
It's complex, and we this is going to go on, this debate. And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we should have this debate on this issue. It hasn't happened before in the same way. You haven't had presidents being prosecuted through the courts for what they did when they were in office. Maybe that should have happened sooner. So
one of the responses we could go with, well, maybe there should be some consequences for a war criminal in Bush. Maybe there should be some consequences for, you know, they're talking about the ICC having a crack at Netanyahu. Why not Bush? Why not Obama if they've committed international crimes or war crimes?
Exactly. And you know, it would be really interesting, and of course it would have a significant deterrent power. If that were the case, if you had to think, well, what if I do this? If I launch this drone strike, could I be prosecuted through the courts? Perhaps I better not, you know, launch that drone strike. But wouldn't that be a good thing? I mean, I think it's, you know, it's worth thinking about all of these issues, but there are always unintended consequences, aren't there? So we also have to be mindful of those.
And it'll be something we continue to talk about, Geoffrey. Look, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to find out more about you, or the good thing about your website, geoffreymiller.info, is it's got all your links there, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and a YouTube channel. It's all just there for people to find out more about you. Any other? What's the highlight of the place they should find you? Like, if they're going to go to one place to find out more about you, Geoffrey.
I said to you before the show, I probably haven't updated the website for a couple of months, but I try and keep my social media a bit more updated with my interviews and articles and so forth. So click on to X, or still shows the Twitter logo, but it's X, of course, these days, where I'm quite judicious what I post these days. So I just tend to put what I publish or where I'm interviewed. So if you want my latest content, that's a good place to go. The YouTube channel, I also try and put up the interviews that I do on radio and TV, and the one I did on the Pacific Media Network is there. So if you want to see those or listen to those, then check out the YouTube channel. But thanks for having me on.
Geopolitical analyst and fellow Dunedinite. How about that?
Indeed.
I weren't even aware. Geoffrey Miller joins us tonight. Thanks, Geoff. We appreciate your time, man. We'll catch you around town.
Hey, thanks, Pat. Thanks, Chewy.
All the best.
Cheers, mate. Have a good night.
All right, Chewy, there's a few comment stuff that have come in. We should get to some of these. Okay, they can just wait actually for a moment. Anything else you want to reflect on from that conversation? The immunity thing's fascinating because, you know, you got to tie that into Trump saying, you know, I'm just going to be a dictator on the first day. But when now he's been given the availability of potentially being a dictator, what does that mean? I'm going to be a king from the second day onwards? And I know they talk about official acts, but I mean, it seems that many experts, commentators, Joe Biden could call in SEAL Team 6 to assassinate Trump.
Yeah,
according
first.
Because he's a threat to democracy. So it's an official act. He could do that. It's just it's quite terrifying, actually.
I mean, I think this is a reflection of, like, as much as the Americans like to think outside of their country. In this case, they're really thinking inside.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's thinking of the political consequences, and Trump is just thinking of himself. That's all. He knows he's been doing dodgy shit. He knows he's been selling state secrets. He knows that if he doesn't close this fucking loophole for immunity, he is screwed.
Yeah.
He had boxes of classified documents in his toilet. You know, it's just fucked. Like
the addendum you have to give to that. There's a point you have to add on to those classified documents, because Biden had some as well. He had boxes of classified documents that he refused to give back, because he's not being charged with any of the ones he gave back. He's only being charged for the ones that he hid, that his lawyer got moved, that he tried to not give back. Biden had some boxes as well. When he was told about them, he gave them back straight away, and that's why Biden's not being charged. So we've got to have the right context here as well. He's not being charged because he had classified documents, because many of them do. He's being charged because he refused to give them back. That was what it's about. Sorry, my pedant side comes out occasionally.
No, that's absolutely fine. It's an important point.
Apparently we were late today, and some people were unhappy. But Banterius Lemon has paid our late fee for us. Apparently, I got you covered, homies.
Excellent name. I love it.
Thank you for the $10 super chat. It's very generous. Alex says, I was late yesterday. Donos to the sexiest commies. Okay, thank you. I think is that you? It's both of us. Both of us. Mr. Arvids, I'll shout your late fee. What are you guys talking about? I wonder what time we started.
You guys are vicious.
Vicious,
so catty.
late fee. And also, this is going to go on to the next conversation. Turns out Labor not so bad. Yep, we're going to get into that conversation shortly. How National has now going with a policy very similar to the one they literally said was, well, I'm not saying literally said because that means they did. They basically said was communism, and now they're doing it and acts like, what the fuck, bros? We said no to this. So in all of acts, you know, horridness, they're being consistent. Credit where credit's due. Anything else in the chat or anything that you want to mention?
No, I think you covered off everything there. Oh, Kooky snuck in. He's present. Good to know.
Present. Here's a little one. It's quite an interesting one though, Chew. You might have some stuff to offer about this, because I think Timaru was a place for live exports, and it probably will be again soon. I have a feeling that was a place. So this is in Australia. Live animal exports. Legislation passes to end live sheep exports by sea from Australia. Live sheep exports by sea will end in May 2028 after the Australian Senate passed the legislation in a late night sitting. Last minute lobbying by West Australia farmers and business owners was not enough to have the legislation blocked, with Labor forcing the bill through the Senate on Monday night. Interesting choice of words there, forcing. The proposal will mean an end to live sheep exports by sea on May the 1st, 2028, with a $107 million transition package to flow to affected farmers. This is an election commitment that we took to not just one, but two elections, and we're now delivering on that election commitment, as Australians would expect us to do so, Agricultural Minister Murray Watt told the Senate on Monday. Further down the paragraph, it talks about the Keep the Sheep supporters travelling to Canberra on Monday to plead their case, and then they had a keep the sheep, and they had a response by the president of Western Australia's Farmers Association, I think. He says, we will be targeting every marginal Labor seat across the country to try and get what we need. President of Western Australia's Farmers, John Hassell, told a media conference in Canberra on Monday. The coalition has vowed to overturn legislation if it is re-elected. That's an interesting point, though, Chewie. I was thinking, why are they leaving it till 2028? There's at least one more election before that. The opposition can run on that. I know that there's going to be a time scale thing and you can't just cut people's wages off, but if they did it before the election, and therefore got rid of the infrastructure, it would be harder to turn around. Now, let me give you a Dunedin-based example, Chewie. I have a red wheelie bin from Waste Management. Okay? I've had it.
It's a very regional transition.
But you'll get the points. I've had it for 5 or 6 or 7 years. We've just found out from the DCC that every house in Dunedin is now going to have one of these bins as a part of our rates. So what that means for Waste Management, much like for the farmers who do live exporting, is they no longer have a business because nobody's got. I thought today, who would hire one? I was like, should we keep 2? So I phoned Waste Management today and I said, I'm thinking about cancelling my bin. And the lady said, every contract has already been cancelled in Dunedin. It's happened automatically because of what the council has done. And I went, oh, okay, so what's happening for picking up the bins? And she said to me, we don't know yet. Ready for this? We have to find out how to pick up 19,000 bins. So Waste Management has just had that contract taken out from under them, and the council is now I'm sure that Waste Management is still picking it up, but the bins are no longer there. So there had to be a flow on, there had to be a downstream effect. They had to do it in a way that Waste Management wouldn't go bankrupt, because that wouldn't be right. So I get that there has to be a time delay. See, there was a point, but it seems 2028 is a long way away to have to wait. Surely 2026, could have done it by then, end of 2025, and that would make it harder for the opposition to then run on, we're going to bring it back, we're going to bring it back. One more paragraph, sorry, Joe. We know this is an industry that's been in long-term decline, and the numbers of sheep being exported by sea have fallen by 90% over the last 20 years, Senator Watt said. The legislation also won the support of Green Senator Mehan Farki, who wanted to drop what the trade dropped because of animal welfare conditions. Nothing can be done to make live export ships safe for animals. This cruel trade is irredeemable, and the only option is to shut it down, she said. Now it is beyond time to shut this industry once and for all. And obviously the reason I'm bringing that for a bit of a chat, Chewie, is last week, what did we find out in New Zealand? Is that we're bringing it back. Nothing can be done to make live export ships safe for animals. This cruel and this cruel trade, is irredeemable, and the only option is to shut it down. Whilst our government goes, right team, let's fire this back up again.
Yeah. It's an absolutely monstrous fucking practice. It makes absolutely no sense. And as pointed out with the Australian example, most farmers had turned away from it, and it's just the last holdouts. It had never understood the idea why these floating concentration camps were seen as a good option for a country that tries to hold itself up as like quite an ethical farmer. Whether you agree with the farming practices around meat and that sort of thing, notwithstanding, it fucking happens. But you know, these ships were just monstrous. They're indefensible, irredeemable, as mentioned in that article. And I don't think anybody with a shred of ethics would stand for it. As you mentioned, Pat, I grew up in Timaru. And yes, that's where a lot of those ships came in, and you could smell them across the entire city. You could hear them from kilometers away. Just horrible. And I just don't see why that is seen as a better option than, you know, processing the product here and exporting it as a frozen thing. From an animal husbandry point of view, from an ethics point of view, from an economical point of view, live sheep export is a one-way trip for a hiding. And like when a lot of our export partners are now looking at things like food miles, animal welfare, carbon offsets, all of that sort of thing. This is the past.
That looks comfy, eh? In a ship.
Oh, and that's probably at the start. There's a reason why they don't show the ships at the end of the journey.
Because they are literally covered in feces and all sorts of other things as well.
There's a reason why all the footage and pictures of these ships at sea or towards the end of their journey have to be smuggled out.
Yeah, it's just a bizarre one, actually, because I don't know. I mean, other than particular cultures or religions that need to kill a live animal as a part of their preparation, I don't know how big that market is, especially as if Australia is telling us the practice has dropped by 90% already.
Yeah.
Then, you know.
And from a cultural point of view, like, this is why we had halal butchers. Like, we solved that problem. And it's again this thing of like, we can't do things here. We have to send them overseas. They'll do the finishing work. They'll add the value, that sort of thing. Ugh.
I mean, as you said, Chewy, no longer white sheep, are they?
No, it's a floating concentration camp.
Yeah. Yep. And this is what our government supports. Now, I know that people are going to go, well, they don't support treating like this. I guess the point is you can't not have that. There's no system out there that, for example, will take the feces away.
Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry. But, you know, look at it. Maybe it'd be nice to talk to Mr. Luxon and show him that video and see what they think about that. Because you know what they'll say? They'll go, we'll do it properly. But no one's ever figured out how to do it properly. No one's ever figured out how to do it safely. And even if it's just do they call it the yawl of the boat, the way it tips, whatever it is, you know, that's cruel to them because they don't know what it is. They'll fall over, they break bones. You know, it's just, there's no way of doing it. Maybe what I'll do, I'm gonna put this link because I know that was pretty graphic what I just put. But if people are interested in finding out for themselves, I'll just put a link in the chat and you guys can go look at it yourselves because you might want to have it for someone else.
I mean, I have enough trouble seeing like stock trucks going around and that sort of thing. That I think is traumatizing enough. But you know, I had a friend once who had a look inside a stock truck that was just in a petrol station. The guy was going to get a pie and take a leak or whatever. He looked at the truck. He never ate meat ever again. Like I get there's a realism to this, right? Is that yes, we should be cutting down on eating meat, and we know all the bad stuff. But live animal exports are so far ahead of that and just pure cruelty. It's indefensible. And anyone in the New Zealand farming sector that wants to hold themselves up and go, I am a good farmer, I look after my animals and that sort of thing, cannot then go, we want this.
Yeah.
It's damaging to the entire reputation of New Zealand animal production.
Yep. Yeah. Apologies about showing that if it upsets some people, but you know, someone saying in the chat, this is awful to watch, but we oughtn't look away. I get it. So that's why I put the link in there and you can investigate it for yourselves. All right, let's have a look at the next story because the next story is the government now selling with great gusto policy that they fought against tooth and nail when it was Labour's policy. Now, I know most of you probably understand this, pardon me, but for those who don't, I want to explain what the digital issue is with news channels, because I know I've had conversations with people and they're like, yeah, but like Facebook, I put product up on Facebook and they share it that way. It's like, no, what they do is a thing called, and correct me if my terms are wrong here, Chewy, but they call it scraping the web. They scrape off websites. So I've just done a little example here. I don't know why I did this. I was just talking to someone today about arthritis and I put a question into Google, how many people have arthritis in New Zealand? And this answer comes up, arthritis is a common condition that affects more than 700,000 people in New Zealand. Now, that line is from that website. So if I click into there, it'll be highlighted, I think, in yellow. And there it is, or in purple. So that's the line that just did. Now, the reason that Google needs to pay for that is I've got the answer that I'm looking for, thanks to Arthritis New Zealand, but I haven't had to go into the Arthritis New Zealand page. Now, Arthritis New Zealand is obviously an organisation. It may not be with them, but if it was, say, Newstalk ZB, and I didn't have to go into the Newstalk ZB page because I found the answer through scraping, and it was just up on Google, then what that means is Newstalk ZB loses out on the possibility of someone clicking through an advert, which means they lose out on potential income. So that's what they're talking about. Just for complete clarity, they're talking about scraping information off news websites, putting it up on Google like that, so you don't have to go to those news websites. That's pretty fair and clear, Chewy?
Yep.
Anything else you want to add to that, or we got it? We nailed it.
No, we've solved it.
We've solved it.
Look, I think this is a hugely important issue for news producers and content producers and that sort of thing, because yeah, you can get so much for free, and it has changed the way that people treat their news gatherers. It has put our news gathering at risk of the algorithm self-selecting for us. It has weakened our democracy. It has weakened local reporting. It is now costing us a choice when it comes to our news here in New Zealand. And this is something that is not just affecting New Zealand, it's affecting every news producer on the planet.
Yeah. And
Google has done nothing to remedy it or make people feel better. So then governments have to step in my opinion.
And just remember, if you're one of those people that go, go and won't go broke, these media agencies, they should be able to survive. Well, this is actually literally taking money out of their pockets. So this is places like Google now, because you'll see the Google advert on the Google search page, right? So they actually are now making money off, let's say, Newstalk ZB, or let's say TV NZ, or whatever it is. And then, so it's actually like a double whammy. The content that Newstalk ZB is producing is now making money for Google rather than money for Newstalk ZB, because you'll see the Google advert on the Google page. You won't see the advert or click through on the ZB page because they've scraped the information. So it's not just like a whammy, it's like a double whammy. They pay for the content. So there's a cost to Newstalk ZB, and Google gets the money for it. So they're out of pocket, Google's into pocket, whatever the correct analogy is up on the idea. So let's have a look at this story from today. To be frank, this is the News Hub one. News Hub's still doing pretty good with their coverage on YouTube. I actually watched the TVNZ story. I didn't watch the News Hub story, but this is the News Hub version of the story. So let's have a look at what they've got to say.
The final days of the little newsroom that could. Staff at News Hub still pumping out the news as they pack up, readying to say goodbye. The demise of the institution.
It's the end of the news as we know it.
Along with cuts across other media businesses, spurred pressure on government to step in and take action. Now, finally,
G'day.
Enter Paul Goldsmith, pushing ahead with the Fair News Digital Bargaining Bill, a framework for news companies to get tech companies to the negotiating table to start paying for local news content. The bill was first introduced by Labour, but will be amended to include a minister in the process who will decide which tech companies will be subject to the law.
Now, we'll go through this slowly, but the parties of less regulation and the parties of less political interference now are going to have a digital website czar to say what will and won't be able to be included. One person, one minister, with all the power to decide who and how they're going to be implemented. Why the party of less regulation thinks that this is a better idea than what Labour had, who knows? But it's a very, very strange situation that they would create a situation that if Labour had done it, they'd be like, too much power for that person, and they've gone and done it. So, but Labour bad.
Minister in the process who will decide which tech companies will be subject to the law.
The primary point of the legislation is to act as a backstop in the hope that negotiations will happen, and it will only become relevant if there's an absence of that negotiation.
That was the last straw for ACT, which has invoked its agree to disagree clause. It's concerned ministerial involvement could undermine public trust in media.
It won't save media. It may make things worse.
So I'm not surprised, because they always talk about the market dictating while the market is broke.
Yeah, I mean, love them or hate them, ACT is being consistent. They're actually staying the path. It's the other guys who have fought against this for such a long time, who are changing their path. Now, I might think that their changing path is good, right? But let's be fair, that ACT is staying consistent on a position. I disagree, but they're staying consistent. And all of a sudden, all this beating up of Labor and all this nanny state from Labor and, you know, we'll get out and there'll be less of this. And then they do what Labor was going to do anyway. That still has to be acknowledged, even if we agree with the law, Chewy.
Yeah, I agree. ACT is being consistent in this case. Consistently shitty.
Yeah, sure.
And it plays into their hands for like the Atlas stuff. It's like it's in their interest if we don't have local media calling things from our perspective. If we're getting our news from overseas, or there's nothing local with money to run anymore, that's good. That's good for the Atlas project. So if David Seymour's squealing, it's good.
All right, we'll keep going.
They always talk about the market dictating. Well, the market is broke and the government has to support.
Australia and Canada have tried similar things. Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook, threatened to stop publishing news in those countries.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that outcome. We'll wait and see how things evolve.
Meta told Newshub in a statement this bill ignores the realities of how our platforms work, their voluntary nature, the preferences of the people who use them, and the free value we provide news publishers. We will continue to be open and transparent with the government and publishers on our business decisions as this bill progresses.
I am less certain on how I can see how Google scrapes sites. I'm less aware. I haven't quite figured out how much Facebook has done the similar thing, because as I said, your racist Uncle Tonna Nelson, he puts up the stuff article on Facebook to his followers. So I'm less clear on the crime that they're committing, but obviously the devil is in the detail. I don't know all the detail. Do you understand the detail with how Facebook is doing it? So
I think with that is that when you put up a link on Facebook, it gives you the headline and maybe the first paragraph.
So it still scrapes.
And if that's enough,
gotcha,
that people don't click through, or people click through to the actual website less.
Yep.
Then they are harming.
Sure.
That,
no, I can
process.
see that. I can see that completely. All right.
Sinead Boucher, publisher of Stuff, says she's concerned the ministerial delegation may be a way to exclude Meta from the process, and hopes the government will back New Zealand companies to get fair value from what she calls the biggest disinformation engine in the world.
It shows that they're willing to get into some kind of game of chicken with governments to see who's really in control and who can sort of exert the most influence.
The government's also decided that television advertising should be allowed on Sundays, which the minister estimates could add $6 million in ad revenue into the market. And is it you or is it me?
You're not in Guatemala now, Dr. Ropata.
It's all of us. Taxpayers could be funding Shorty. The screen production tax rebate, which has helped overseas productions like Lord of the Rings, will become available to local shows like Shortland Street.
I think it's an important institution. It would be great if it
That's not bad.
continue.
Local product,
most famous fictional
accessing more money or different money.
Well, our political editor.
One of the things I did get confused with in there is she said television advertising on Sunday. I'm sure she said that. That's not right.
The government's also decided that television advertising should be allowed on Sundays, which the minister estimates.
Because television advertising is already allowed on Sundays. So she got it wrong. It's like Christmas and Easter. It's those days. It's Publix. It's where it's not allowed. So it's not Sundays, because there is television advertising on Sundays, but it's like Christmas and someone's saying Sunday morning. So no advertising on Sunday morning. Okay, well, if that's the case, I will stand corrected. But my understanding was it was public holidays, like Easter Sunday. Yeah, like Peter saying, Easter Sunday and Christmas and that kind of stuff. But if there's none on Sunday morning, stand corrected. Yeah, so Chewy, it's an interesting little situation. As I said, it's TVNZ had quite a more cutting part. They pointed to Melissa Lee and they showed some words that Melissa Lee had said about this terrible legislation that Labor was promising, and it's basically exactly the same with one little addition in there as well. And ACT is saying no because they've always said no, and now the National New Zealand First part of the coalition needs to go to Labor and say, will you please support our legislation? And I suspect Labor probably will, because it's very similar to their bill.
But we are, of course, beholden at this point because ACT have invoked this agree to disagree. That we must now, speaking hyperbole, are these the cracks in the government starting to show? Is it all over?
It's a good thing, this. I mean, like I just said, if any, I mean, like, you know, Chewy, you know artists. You know how artists are always like, there's a trend that goes around TikTok, and it's a little song that goes something like, you know, this is why I charge so much. This is how fucking long this took to make. And it's like, you know, it takes in 60 seconds, it shows 9 hours of someone doing a panel. Artists and people who work in that world, and if you're a graphic designer, you'll know this as well. They are forever undervalued, right? And actually, when we were talking to Geoffrey as well, and he talked about AI, and I said automation, the other thing is templates and stuff as well, which is taking work away. I mean, I use the Adobe suite because that's what I edit in, but that gives me access to Photoshop and Photo Illustrator and that kind of stuff. And the stuff that you can just do with their templates that you pay a monthly fee to use this package, and they have people designing templates and putting on it, and you can just basically make something 80% as good as a graphic designer, 70% as good as a graphic designer. So there's these templates, and then there's automation, and then there's AI taking work off these people. And, you know, people who create stuff get undervalued. And that's sort of like people who create the content, the journalists who are creating content. They're now, it's not that they're not being valued by their workplace, but if the workplace is not making any money off their production, that's why these media companies, one of the reasons these media companies are going under. So it's got to be, this has to be done. There has to be a way that the end user or the end gainer, being Google, pays for access to stuff that costs the company.
Pat?
Yeah.
I am, much as ACT has invoked their agree to disagree clause, I am now invoking my tangent time clause.
Cool. I'll go make a coffee.
We've talked about AI a couple of times tonight, and I spent all day talking about fucking AI.
Sure.
You mentioned artists; they're getting fucked by AI.
Yeah, for sure.
Every piece of work that they put online to get sales, to increase their recognition and that sort of thing, is getting crawled by AI bots. They can wholesale rip off specific artist styles, ideas, all of this sort of thing. AI was supposed to make life easier for us all, to automate the boring, repetitive jobsmith work that people have to do. Instead, it's coming for our creators.
Yeah.
It's writing scripts. It's making pictures. I can't continue down this track without acknowledging that our theme song at the end is AI generated. It is taking money away from artists. And I think one of the big things is, like, we've all seen Facebook Meta roll out their AI with no opt-in, opt-out. It's just there. There's nothing you can do about it. It's there. And part of that was that they now had the rights to crawl all of your photos to train their AI. Microsoft's rolled out an AI. You had no say in that. There are two different ones. There's the consumer Copilot, which is consistently terrible. And then there's a paid for one for corporates, which is apparently good. You know, everybody is rolling out an AI program. Think about how much information Google has on you. They have an AI, and they have access to your photos, to your movements, all of this sort of stuff. And we never got a fucking say in it. And it is not coming for the hard, repetitive work, the boring work. It is coming for our creativity, and it's coming for our democratic process. It's giving people the tools to fool people. You know, watching this presentation that my workmate showed me that his friend had made, you know, again, for just a little instructional video, he was able to have an AI presenter that was, to be honest, hand on heart, pretty hard to tell that it was an AI.
Yeah.
Unless you knew what you were looking at. That was a job that would have gone to someone that was a presenter. That would have been a paid for job. Now it doesn't have to be. So AI is a massive concern to me.
All right. So you're not calling us out on this. We haven't done anything wrong, but I'll do this. Someone wants to write us a theme song, produce us a theme song. BHN will pay you $250. Is that fair enough, Chewy?
Yeah.
No AI.
I think it would be good. We could get
produce us. I'm being serious. Produce us a theme song. And look, if we get 10 that come in and we pick one, the other 9 we won't use, and the one we use, we'll give you $250. Because this is interesting, because I've just written into an AI, whatever they call it, image search, a New Zealand flag done by a 6-year-old. That's what I wrote, and this is what's come up. You could use that in a news item.
Fucking look at that hand, bro.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, but it wouldn't be hard to continue on that there's a kid painting a thing. That's the first search.
Like we've spoken recently about how some people have real problems with critical thought when it comes to social media. When you put these images on and they, you don't look at things like I'm at the point now where if I see an image that I even have a skerrick of disbelief, I wonder if this is, I'm looking at eyes, I'm looking at hands, I'm looking at the interaction between figures and that sort of thing. But other people won't.
Yeah.
Like, what about that image of Trump sitting on a step with a whole bunch of African American people? Like, people would just look at that and go, "That's real enough for me."
Yeah.
It's going to mess with people. People that don't know what they're looking at, that can't spot it, will believe this, and by the time that it's thoroughly debunked, it doesn't matter. The damage is done.
I was just thinking as well, because someone's written in the chat, it screamed past that AI can be good for prep. They didn't say preparation, something like that. And I think I was talking to, I started a new podcast that I did a few of called Let's Talk Funny, just talking to comedians. And I think I might have asked Di about AI writing jokes. I could be wrong, but one of the comedians, AI writing jokes for comedians. And he said, they said, whoever it was, they can use it to kind of get a starting point for an idea, like the person in the chat was saying, using for something. It could be used as a way to get the idea flowing with some examples of something for then you to bounce off the back with. But I mean, it's not what's going to happen. One of the things about kind of doing talkback and opinion-based stuff is it's one of the safer areas in media. I'm not saying people can't be replaced eventually, but write me an invitation to my wedding, piece of piss. AI, write me a resignation letter, piece of piss. AI, can we talk about the kind of nuance between the debate about that more difficult, not impossible, more difficult. So information that's opinion based is still something that doesn't seem to have been touched so much.
I mean, I wonder, Pat, because we have over 2 years of shows, thousands and thousands of hours of us talking about issues. Are you pointing AI at that? People can make us say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we're relying on the fact that AI is fucking bad and produces images like this.
The stick coming out of her little finger?
Well, that's one of them. Anything else? When was the last time you went camping, Pat?
All right, sorry. All right, got it.
And this is the thing, we laugh at issues like that. We laugh at the things that AI gets wrong. It is learning. It is literally training. It is working out what we spot.
Yeah.
And I love one of the memes I said is it's like the old myths about, be careful of mysterious figures you find in the forest and that sort of thing. Always check their eyes, always check their teeth, always check their fingers. It's the same with AI. It's some of it can be funny. There's lots of fake songs out there at the moment, very much like our theme song. There's lots of these images that we all poke fun at.
Can I just point, you who sent us the theme song, we love it. It's great. It's fun.
We legitimately love it.
But I think the thing that Chewy's just said is probably fair. Look, to put it this way, if no one decides to try and write us a theme tune, then we'll keep using it. If someone wants to try and write us a theme song and we use it, we'll pay you for it. Maybe $250. I think it's okay. We go 50-50 on that, actually. On that 250. You fine with that?
Sure.
Why not? Let's do it. Hey, I've got one other story that I haven't seen, but I saw the heading And I thought that this audience might like it, and I thought you might like it, Chewy. Haven't seen this. It's on News Hub. It reads, parent calls for guidelines after Seymour's historic Snapchat messages to teen daughter. Now, we've talked around this a few times, but we've never actually talked about this. And I think that this is something that you guys who are watching will be a part of. I see lots of laughter in the chat. I'd actually like to know more about it, Chewy. So let's wrap up the show with this, eh? Let's have a look at what News Hub has got to say.
A parent is calling for guidelines around how politicians communicate directly with young people on social media.
She's concerned after finding out David Seymour replied to Snapchat messages from her then 14-year-old daughter and other teens back in 2016. Both the ACT leader and the students say the content was not inappropriate.
But the mother says the fact a much older politician was directly messaging them at all is bizarre. Seymour says he was just being courteous. Perry Wilton reports.
It's funny because he's never been courteous a day in his life after that. It's a weird thing to say.
So this one is one of the streaks that he sent.
This former Epsom girl's grammar...
I mean, he's sending photos in Snapchat. I mean, apparently there's nothing untoward, but that's pretty weird.
I would almost consider that photo suggestive because... you know, that low angle.
That's pretty weird. We're not going to go there. We're going to watch ourselves through defamation, but that's still pretty weird.
A student was 14 when she started messaging David Seymour. It was 2016, and Snapchatting the politician had become common schoolyard fun.
It was kind of talked about between schools, high schools in Auckland, that if you were to Snapchat David Seymour, he'll reply, basically no matter what you say.
Snapchat allows users to send messages and images that last a few seconds before they're automatically deleted. She would always initiate the messaging, and Seymour would sometimes reply on consecutive days, making what Snapchat calls a streak.
Sent him a selfie of me and a bunch of my girlfriends at 15, drinking vodka cruises, a selfie with us all holding them, saying, oh, come to my party, come to my party. And this was his response.
Seymour replied to one invitation, hope you're not in trouble.
Let's just go back.
Thanks. Seymour replied to...
So the response says, can't, I'm afraid, but you guys have a great night and be safe. The idea of a group of 15-year-olds, nothing sexual, completely dressed, sending a what, 50-year-old? I don't know how old he is, 40-year-old something photo, and having that person respond to it. You know, there's a line between legally doing something wrong and just fucking icky, and this is just fucking icky. It's just icky.
He's 41.
You know? He's 41 now. Jeez, he acts like a 60-year-old. So that means he would have been in his late 30s, 2016. 2016, that's 8 years. He would have been 33. I mean, that kind of feels even ickier. So a 33-year-old sending messages, conversing with a 15-year-old. I don't know.
To one invitation, hope you're not in trouble. Oh, thanks for the invite. Her mother had no idea about the messaging at the time and says any parent would be uncomfortable with their teenager messaging a 30 or 40-year-old man.
Honestly, I just find the whole thing quite bizarre. Reiterated many times that there was nothing inappropriate in the messages themselves, but I think that contact, direct, one-on-one, and particularly via Snapchat itself is inappropriate. He must have been having many messages come through, and it's like, well, who's actually got the time?
Another thing I'm noticing is he replied here at midnight.
This former Auckland grammar student also messaged Seymour when he was 15. He says at the time, it was hilarious.
And I was like, yes, thank you. And yeah, I remember going around school that day and showing everyone that David Seymour had replied to me. That was a big moment.
He says the messages from Seymour were not inappropriate.
Yeah, there was no malevolence behind it or anything. I think I'd like to get that out there. And at the time, talking to him, I felt very safe and comfortable.
But now he's in his early 20s. His feelings about whether MPs should be able to communicate directly with minors.
Do you know what's weird? I mean, apart from the obvious, it's that he's sending photos. You don't have to send a photo. My kids use Snapchat. It's the mode of communicating with one another all the time. But you can see no photo on the me, no photo on the David, no photo on the me, then a photo of David. That's the thing that feels even ickier. I mean, like, you know, Chewy, if someone messaged me on Twitter, right, and I didn't know who they were or what they were about, I might go, sweet, thanks, bro, thanks for the support, whatever, move on. But would I do you know what I mean? That feels the weird part about it. That's what it is. It's the photo that makes it feel a bit ick. That's what it is. You want to say anything?
Yeah,
Keep going.
There's a lot here that makes me feel ick and is just ill-considered. Now, Seymour's not the only politician to have been caught like this. Remember the Bish, famously also. Same platform, Snapchatting teens. I think for a public servant to be messaging people, non-voters, underage, on a platform that is designed to disappear the messages, is just unwise. It just like none of this, like, aren't their communications supposed to be recorded? Like, so you can official information act them?
Yeah, yep.
So how do you do that with Snapchat?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good point.
So I don't think any politician should have Snapchat anywhere near their devices.
Yeah, interesting.
Quite apart from the fact that they're messaging underages. And I think that, like, David will cling to the fact that he's just engaging with the youth. Remember, these youth, he doesn't believe should be able to vote. So why are you messaging under 18s, David?
They
can't fucking vote.
This is also the thing, though, is that if David messaged everybody, like if he's got messages to these kids and 20-somethings and 30-somethings and 40-somethings, that would be different. So that's a piece of information we don't have at the moment, but it's been sold as something he's been doing to kids. And again, look, I can see some of the comments in the chat making particular accusations. I guess the only accusation you can make at the moment is this does not feel like a wise thing to do. Beyond that, we can't say anything that may or may not be an intention. We'd have no idea, and as far as we know, there's nothing about it other than this is just weird, dude. This is just weird. We're going to keep playing, yeah?
Directly with minors have changed.
Yeah, having an adult have such free access to so many students is, I don't like it at all, regardless of what they talked about or anything like that.
David Seymour is making no apologies for replying to the students, saying he was being courteous.
I've done absolutely nothing wrong other than be responsive using the technology of the time. I've always sought to behave the same online as I am in person. School kids come up to me and ask for selfies. I think it'd be a terrible thing if New Zealand got to the stage where I had to say, no, sorry, you don't have permission from your parents.
But that doesn't sit well with this parent, who wants a change in how politicians can communicate with children.
Guidelines or rules or regulations in place so this sort of thing doesn't happen and isn't allowed to happen.
David Seymour says he barely uses Snapchat anymore, saying other social media sites are more relevant.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the story overall.
He's left himself wide open. He's left himself wide open for this. Nobody in that article is saying that he has done something
illegal,
inappropriate, or illegal, but he has left himself open to it. And it's dude, what are you thinking? What, like, legitimately, what was your thought process? I'm just being courteous. Do you think any other politician, apart from Bishop, has the time to reply to teenagers Snapchatting you at midnight?
I'll tell you a story. I know people who work, who have contracts as electricians and plumbers for intermediate schools. They will not go onto the school's grounds until after 3 o'clock. They refuse to put themselves in a position that they're obviously, when you say this on one level, you might be going, because they're a bit dodged. The opposite. They don't want to put themselves in a position to have any kind of misunderstanding, silliness. You know, if you're a plumber in the girls' toilet, I walked in and there was some strange man there, whatever. So they actually set themselves a safety barrier for that by turning up after the kids have gone. This feels what David Seymour is doing as the opposite of that. This feels like turning up in the middle of class time and, you know, chatting on the phone and other things, secret messages on your phone to all the kids that are there. It's bizarre.
Yeah, none of it's on the public record, you know, and you know, teachers wouldn't do this.
Yeah,
you know, I heard a story recently of a teacher that tried to set up a Snapchat group with their students and was instantly called up on it by their colleagues, going, don't do that. Because whether it's inappropriate or not, it's the appearance that it could be. And for teachers, that's vital. Like any adult interacting with someone half their age, I just think it's David Seymour's age. I would feel fucking weird messaging 15-year-old girls at school, and I would rightly get called on it by anybody that found out about it.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not engaging with a voter base or you're not engaging in anything to do with your actual job. I think it comes across as someone that is just a little bit too eager to be liked by a group that he sees as cool. You know, it comes across like he's quite lonely. And that there's another risk in that is we're at the risk of humanizing David Seymour.
Well, you know what, I can do something straight away, and I can bring this conversation full circle. If you go into AI generated images and you type out David Seymour on Snapchat, this is what you get.
Oh, that's unpleasant.
So that's dehuman. I don't know what this is. There's your fingers.
Look at the hand.
There's
See,
your fingers.
Always check the fingers.
Always
that's how you tell.
That's
What the
like
fuck is that yellow goblin?
I think it must be Snapchat. That was the thing.
Why have they given David just like this immaculate jawline that doesn't exist in real life?
I don't know.
Yeah, no. AI. Still learning.
Yeah. Anyway, you've got to be careful. I imagine what might pop up if you put the wrong thing in there. We'll just put it that way right now. All right, team. Oh, there's a bunch of text and stuff as well we should get to. Let's do that. Oh, your stream started in the middle of you talking, so we missed the beginning. Really?
Yeah.
That isn't a big deal.
Was it that, or was it the fact that I launched immediately into the first tangent that I could get to?
That's weird because we have an 80-second song that plays at the start, and they always go live during that, and then so that means there might have been like a minute delay. Okay. Gold says, no, it's a big deal. I also heard a rumor that Seymour is the worst example of a human. Can you look into this? We need to know. To which Mr. Arvid says, can confirm Gold, he is the worst. To which Gold said, good to know, Mr. Arvid. Chirp. Rajan, I'm not going to put your comment on the screen. I'll read half of it out of those. Seymour is a certified lover boy. Lover boy. I'm not going to put that up though, because I know what those initials are saying of him, which we're not going to put out there. Mr. Arvid says, Seymour, and thank you, Rajan. Rajan, we'll credit the super chat you did make. Seymour is Cartman from South Park. How do we reach these kids? How do we reach these kids? How do we reach these kids? And Mr. Arvid, I'm not going to put your other comments up, even though it's super chat. I acknowledge you for it, and we're just not going to put it up there. So. Sorry. That's how we roll. We say to you guys, if you do super chats, if they're not going to, they don't, no guarantee that they'll go up. We thank you for them. But we don't. Teachers wouldn't dare. I guess that's communicating with kids after school hours and on social medias. Oh my gosh. And then, hang on. What's that? Citizen Gold says, Chewy, I'm willing to match that 250 for a non-AI theme song. That makes that $500.
$500.
Wow. I'll actually have to put that out there as a tweet tomorrow. Then we'll make sure that some people know about that. All right. Well, there you go. Okay. That's about me for now. Chewy, what else is there?
The world continues its descent into madness. You mean apart from that?
Yeah, apart from that. Anything else? Okay. Any other chats you want to get to?
No, I think you got all of them.
All right, team. I actually saw some of the conversation on Bomber's show tonight, and they were talking a little bit about political things. My mind's gone blank. It's time of night. And we'll talk about some political things tomorrow. Is that slick enough, Joey? Does that work for you?
That's pretty good. Updates on the world's increasing march into fascism.
Yeah, the stuff we're going to talk about. I think they were talking about the media. That's what I was going to say. The media decision, because, obviously some members of the panel do not want it to be. And Willie Jackson's on the panel, so it was quite a good conversation about that. So we'll cover off that tomorrow night. Other than that, I guess, and if there's nothing else from you, Chewy, then we can be kind of done for the night, I guess.
Yep, that sounds like us. God, I forgot all about working group tonight. I wasn't there to bully Damien Grant. I hope you guys all did it for me.
I was there at the start, and you got to look. It's hilarious. There was some fascinating stuff being said about us on by a couple of people. It was very, very funny. It made me literally laugh out loud.
And shoot, pick up the news, big Henry style.
$500 for a human rewrite.
New Zealand, where the politics play, they bring the truth every single day. Talking about the mess all over the land. They shine a light with a mic in their hand. No time for cheese, just facts straight up. Glad and chew, never backing up. From the Cape to Bluff, no place too far. They expose the truth and raise the bar. Politicians tremble at their mighty voice. Cat and chew, they'll make the right choice.
Mātua whānau, thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you to Geoffrey Miller for coming and saying good day. Good day, loves. Good day, and good to speak with you as well. Remember, that's a real thing. Design us a theme tune that we can use in the opening and the closing, and apparently there's currently a pool of $500 up for someone who does that. Remember, also it does mean, though, you might spend some time doing it, you might not get anything, because if like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people do it, we'll only be picking one of them. But up to you, up to you. If you want to be a part of what we do, head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And after all, apart from that, I should be saying, that's it for me. Thanks, team, for being a part of us tonight. Hooroo.
See you, fam.